it's a little too late for me to use that updated version of Perse in this class, but hopefully I'll have more classes. I'm not done yet. I have a class this coming semester, but it's just online, and it's just for March. So it's a full class, but it's only half a semester. So that will be interesting, and it's asynchronous. So I doubt if I will ever see any of the students. They might, but you never know. However, I'll try updating my thinking by then. So that's pretty good. But it's also focused on increasing attention to language as the replacement for Geist. With Hegel, you've had the concept of Geist was the main thing that was evolving through time, through history, through politics, through individual dialectic, etc. But with language, that's really where we've gone. So Perse was instrumental in doing that, as it shows here, giving us a version of language that replaces Geist. So that was interesting. And Groke gave me specific places in letters, which I haven't read letters, so that's pretty handy. And it gave me specific letters where I can go and find those. Although the neat thing about getting it from Groke is it gives you the actual quotation, so why would I even go look to see, oh yeah, that's Groke is right. Although that is something you're supposed to keep doing, is checking what AI programs give you, because you can't trust them. Theoretically, you can't trust them. So I'm not sure. All right, so that's interesting. So that was fun. This is on Blackboard, so if you're curious about this here, well, this one is Groke on Me. It's the very last one in course content that I just added. So that's neat. And it's reassuring because basically Groke is affirming the presentation I've been giving you on pragmatism as the richest successor to Hegel than any of the others, which I'm sure you could still argue against if you want to. That could be fun, figuring out, well, it's not really Hegelian. Why not? See, this is Perse calls it the unlimited community of inquirers using signs. And with Berger and Luckman, it became the dialectical social construction of reality, which, have you heard that phrase before? Social construction of reality, is that still current or is that passé? You've heard it at all? Something I do want to talk about today are truth tables, because everybody in the class on Monday last week gave me the impression that no one was familiar with truth tables, and that struck me as difficult. However, I shall go into that. So, and it completes everything with Dewey. So you get Dewey as a part of this whole picture. Okay. However, let's go to Wittgenstein, where we were. there's plenty of YouTube videos on Wittgenstein, of course. If you're fill in some of what I might say, but we had talked about his basic life a little bit, and then talked about his Tractatus, and that was the point where we ended, I think, with maybe a few nebulous things. I even brought up Quine, but that has to be redone for it to make any sense, I think. But so the question becomes, what is the Tractatus all about? Why is it so significant? Why do so many people think Wittgenstein was perhaps the most significant philosopher of that period, especially with regard to the way things turned out for us? Easy way to think of it is that he was influential in two movements in philosophy. The first one was the analytic school, which was focused on Bertrand Russell and Alfred North Whitehead. Kind of neat, Alfred North Whitehead was Bertrand Russell's teacher at Cambridge, and once Russell finished, he joined with Bertrand Russell. Together they wrote the Principia, which some people call the they don't use a hard C. Principia, maybe? Like principle, we say sometimes. Because Principia is actually principles. But in any case, and there's others. So there's quite a few individuals. Gottlob Frege, who I've also heard referred to as Froge, because there is an umlaut there, but I've always heard it Frege, Frege. And those were individuals that had an influence on Wittgenstein, but once Wittgenstein got into it as a young man with a genius, everyone says he's a genius. I love questioning what the hell is a genius in the first place. Can you become a genius? A perfect example is Mozart. Why was he clearly a musical genius? Well, he lived in a home where if you didn't become a genius, there was something wrong with you. Everyone was playing music in his house as he was growing up. His sister was a composer, his older sister, and he, as a child prodigy, was playing music at concerts, and everybody was, what a great, we've seen child prodigies, and so they, if they're given that kind of stimulation and they're healthy enough mentally, they can become like that. And so, but in any case, he's also autistic, which is why when you read his work, and in fact, let's go to the Tractatus itself. This would be the easiest one. So I think this is the copy that has the German and the English, but I'll just take it down. Okay. So what was the project that he was diving into? That was Bertrand Russell. He had read the Principia. The Principia is a 3-volume work which is still historically relevant because we're actually fully immersed in that kind of language. So basically the whole point of the Principia dominates our current view of language, essentially, in many respects. I would say, for example, that the large language models that are such a big thing, the AI that's being used today, the algorithms have to be in his language, in the language that Bertrand Russell and Whitehead put together in the Principia. Updated versions of it, yes, but basically that's where it's coming from. With the specific distinction that the database that those large language models are using is not from that language. So in other words, it's the code that says what to do that's based on that language. But the database that they're reusing constantly, where they say, okay, which word should be next, 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 they're pulling off of a database of all the words that are involved in the interaction with other words. So that the database is the resource that language, the code, is using. And in fact, I suspect that the AI programs that are doing this are not really very complex. They're probably just very basic, because they're just simple. Whenever you get, a query and you need a word to follow this word, pick the word that has been used 99% of the time. Whatever the code is, right? And that's all, because it's really the database that they're copying, and that's not being used in this computer way. It's just the database that it's pulling from, right? It's not actually part of the code. Okay, so Russell basically was engaged in trying to fix language so that it was no longer ambiguous. That kind of interest goes at least back to Leibniz, if not earlier. You might say that making things clear goes all the way back to everybody, trying to clarify what's going on. But what Russell was trying to do is take language and making it symbolic, so that you no longer had the meaning associated with words in everyday use. And as a result, you end up with this symbolism and the relations. And so you end up then with what we today would call predicate logic. And so you get, what's the easiest way to do this? I might just, so if we go back and remember, there are only 4 types of statements that can be true or false, all the way back to Aristotle. So we have all of your subject set is predicate, and then we have no of your subject set is predicate, and then we have some of your subject set is predicate, and we have some of your subject set is not predicate, right? So A-E-I-O, right? All the way back to Aristotle. Arguably interesting shifts all the way through it. Well, taking, and notice I'm just using S and P as a variable, really, for any subject, any predicate in this. But what Russell does is say, okay, we need what we'll call a quantifier. A quantifier, because what we're talking about is all members of the sets and the universal statements. So for anything you pick, if it is the subject, then it is the predicate. And the parentheses enabled the quantifier to bind all occasions of X in this section. It's a grammatical aspect to it. I can do the same thing over here for anything you pick. If it is the subject, then it is not the predicate here. So notice, that's just a symbolic way of saying all S is P, no S is P. That's all it is. Very simple, really. This is a different kind of quantifier. Some is used as there exists at least one. Maybe some, maybe many. Main thing is we know there's at least one of them. So there exists an X such that X is the subject and X is the predicate, right? So You read it, there exists an X such that X is S and X is P. And so that's some S is P, right? Notice instead of a conditional statement, this horseshoe means if, then, right? This means and, so you end up with this and that. There exists an X such that it is both of these. And then the O statement is simply there exists an X, same existential quantifier, and then you have X is S, and it's not the case that X is P.